Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Public Access TV. My name is Doug Goodman, and we're here in the basement of the Lyon County Library in Studio One. And tonight's special show is called Tiger Talk, our October edition. This show will be shown on Charter Channel 8 and Charter Channel 19, and also on Knology, which is formerly Prairie Wave, Channel 35 and 80. And once again, Tiger Talk features some very special people from our Marshall Public Schools. And I'd like to introduce one of our regulars, Superintendent of Marshall Public Schools, Mr. Clint Willard. Welcome.
Good to be back, Doug. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, and it's the middle of October, and or actually early October. This show is actually played throughout the month of October. We try to do a couple of them each month, and we've weathered September, and I know homecoming has kind of wrapped up, or is in this week.
Yeah, it's been a busy homecoming week for us. We had a wonderful talent show, and I believe that's going to be showcased on the television for families and community members to see what our students express their talents. It was an outstanding event, and we crowned a homecoming king and queen, and congratulations to both of those students as they were crowned our homecoming royalty. And we know that our volleyball team has been doing outstanding this week. I believe they've won both their games this week, and it's always nice to get a win against Mankato, and pulled that off last night. And now we're looking forward to a pretty exciting football game Friday night, and I think Tigers are going to come out on top again, and that's something that I hope to see all of our community out supporting, because it's just a great event to share out at the Regional Event Center, and then you couple that with a great football game and an outstanding football program that we have here in Marshall. And great deal of credit goes to Terry Bauman and his coaching staff for what they've done with that football program, because over the years we haven't been to the level where we are now, and we know that a lot of people look at us as the new benchmark of quality in the conference in terms of our football program. So that's pretty exciting. So it's been a real exciting week for our kids with homecoming, and in the midst of all that, we know that we've got some pretty important policy discussions going on too, and we're hoping to showcase some of those to our community as we go forward. Some of those things include specifically tonight, which is, as we're filming, it's October 2nd. Not certain when people will see this, but tonight, and it'll be showcased for people to see, there's a special opportunity that Marshall has. It's to host the K-12 Education House Finance Committee with their chair, Representative Mindy Greiling. And Mindy Greiling is coming out, and she's been touring the state with her committee, talking about what's deemed as the new Minnesota Miracle. And we'll dedicate a whole nother show to talk about what the new Minnesota Miracle is, but this is an opportunity to really hear the new funding plan that's being proposed and will be offered at this next legislative session on how K-12 education should be funded in the state. And it's important because there are some things that really do impact us here locally and do drive what determines some decision-making processes that we as administrators are responsible for here locally. So some very important conversations going on, and it's a busy time of the year. It is a busy time of the year.
It sure is, and of course this is the second edition of Tiger Talk, and in our first edition back in September we had Mr. Bruce Remy, the Activities Director for Marshall Public Schools, on, and tonight we feature another very special guest, and Clint, I'm going to let you introduce our very special guest.
I'm delighted to. Tonight we're excited to welcome to the show Tamara Schultz. Tamara Schultz is our Director of Curriculum, Instruction, and Learning Services for the district. So she has quite an impressive title, but her title isn't nearly as impressive as what she is. And without getting into too many details on that, I'll turn it over to Tammy and let her tell us a little bit about her role and a little bit about herself, Tammy, if you would, and what your background is and what your role is in the district.
Well, I'll start out a little bit about about myself, and then I'll tell you about my role in the Marshall Public Schools. I am a licensed teacher as well as a licensed administrator and superintendent. I have been in 3 different school districts, including Marshall Public Schools. I came from St. Paul Public Schools to take the position at Marshall. Various experiences from K through 12, so that helps me with my position. My position at Marshall Public Schools is the Director of Curriculum, Learning, and Instruction. It's quite a big title. I just go by the Director of Curriculum. And the major things that I take care of are staff development, training for teachers, curriculum alignment, and one of my biggest one is the assessment coordinator. So that takes a lot of my time, and this is my 4th year at Marshall. So a lovely place to be, great school district to be at. So I'm happy to be here, and thanks for having me today.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you here. And I think, Tammy, one of the very first shows we had you on a couple, 3 years ago, and I'm sure changes have occurred since your involvement, but why is your role so important to Marshall Public Schools?
Well, my role is really keeping the eyes on all the details as far as the curriculum alignment and standards are concerned, and also with the testing. And those are the things that the school district is ultimately responsible to make sure student achievement is happening. And so really my role is to keep the superintendent up to date on what's going on, as well as the teachers, and ultimately the parents as well, as to what is happening with our testing, what's going on with the standards and the revisions, and then ultimately making sure that the kids are getting the opportunity to be taught in the areas in which they're going to be assessed. So it's an alignment piece as well as an assessment piece. So it's a system-wide perspective. It's keeping the eyes on all the details as it goes through our system so that everything is lined up so it's fair and honest for the kids, so that they're taught in the area that they need to be taught in, as well as being assessed.
And this isn't Marshall High School. This is the middle school and elementary schools also?
It is all schools in this district, K through 12. And that's my responsibility, to make sure that everybody is on the same page as far as what standards are we supposed to be teaching to. And we teach beyond the standards ultimately, but the main goal is to make sure that those things are at least in place. And then we'll look further beyond that to national standards. But we're making sure that those things are lined up. So it is a K through 12 system.
And when you look at that, Doug, it's really a dynamic role, and it's a very important role because we're in a new era of very high stakes testing and high stakes assessments. And as we look at what that means in terms of high stake assessments and high stakes testing, I think that's really coming home to bear with our students, particularly in the high school, because for not this year's graduating class, not the class of 2009, but the class of 2010, they have to pass a math assessment in order to receive a high school diploma. And Tammy's the one that's helping us to make certain that we're meeting the standards as we look at meeting that requirement to pass that assessment, because I would sure hate to have to be the one to deliver the message to our community saying there's a significant number of our students that, because they didn't pass that math assessment on a state assessment tool, that they're not now going to be able to receive a diploma from Marshall Public Schools. And Tammy's role is so critical to help us make certain that we're doing what we need to with our curriculum, that we're following the standards that are measured in the assessments from the state, so that we can provide every opportunity for our children to be successful on those assessments and realize their hopes and dreams as they look at post-secondary institutions, whatever the case might be, and walk out of Marshall with a diploma in hand. And we're really looking at that. So so there's been questions over time about how important are these roles of directors of curriculum, assessment, and instruction in school systems. And as you can see, and as our community hopefully will understand on how very important this role is as we look at what we're doing in educating and preparing our kids for a future that we know is going to be vastly different than what we live in today.
Well, and of course I know that the assessment process and looking at results is pretty much an ongoing process, but maybe overall you could share with us, how are we doing? How's our students doing? How's Marshall Public Schools doing?
Well, we saw an increase this year in reading and math, and district-wide. Specifically, I'd like to mention that the 10th graders did very well. They went up from 66% in reading as the grade level, 10th grade level, to almost a 78% of all students of that grade level that passed the test, which is a huge increase.
It is.
We saw that the 11th graders also made an increase, and they surpassed the State Department as far as percentage of 11th graders that passed that test. So we were pretty excited about that. We've been working very hard at math. That seems to be the challenge, and not just at Marshall Public Schools, but throughout the state. They changed the test. We have aligned the system. We're in the process of buying new resources for that, the math department, K through 12. But that seems to be an area we did see an increase. We were looking at different things like adding more math standards and more math classes for our students to take, especially in the high school. So we have to set up programs. We're required to do this for kids that do not pass the test, that they would have either a remediation or another class to help them get ready for that test so that they will be able to pass it and graduate from our schools. So that's a responsibility. But as far as that goes, the district has done fairly well. It is a new test. We're in our third season of this test. So as anything, when there's a new test, first of all, you'll see that the students will do fairly well. Then you'll see a dip in the system, and then you see them coming back. In the third year, we saw the student increases across the district coming back. So now we should see a trend where they keep going up as far as district-wide students passing the math and reading test.
Well, and that's a direct correlation to not only the curriculum and what you're implementing every year, but to the staff as well, isn't it?
It really is, and staff development's another big piece of what Tammy does to make certain our staff development dollars are invested in programs and services that are going to produce results. And as you look at changes that have occurred in our curriculum, one of the things that has occurred this year that our community may not be aware of is a requirement that students in the 8th grade are taking algebra. And those are some changes that have been quietly implemented, and some of them have been by state directive, some of them have been by our own directive, saying that we want to continue to push ourselves and challenge ourselves. We know that we've embraced the continuous improvement model utilizing the Baldrige framework, and it's the most rigorous framework for continuous quality improvement that can be found in the United States and in the world for that matter. So we're holding ourselves to such a high standard of accountability, both internally as we look at our internal results, but then externally as well, and that speaks to those results that Tammy shared about our improvements in our instruction and improvements in our assessment results. And when you look at it on a broader scale, even though as a district we didn't make what was called adequate yearly progress last year, we can get into that a little bit more. We saw that 91% plus, so close to 92% of our areas where we're measured in terms of making adequate yearly progress, we saw improvements. So if we're improving in 92% of our areas, our community can be assured that they have a public school system that's doing its job and doing it quite well. And that's something that goes, like you said, a direct credit to our faculty, our support staff members that really are on those front lines working with those students and challenging those students and preparing those students so that they can be successful on those measures that we're accountable for.
So, the reports that come out, I don't know if they come out yearly or a couple times a year about this adequate yearly progress. We didn't meet the current standards, but we are making progress. So what do we do, or what do we have to do to meet that level? And maybe you can...
For the adequate yearly progress, they measure different subgroups. And so subgroups would be Hispanic, special ed, free and reduced lunch, LEP, which is limited English proficiency. They look at Asian, they look at the different subgroups, ethnicity, and then other subgroups like free and reduced lunch and special ed. And the areas in which we are finding ourselves, and I think they are finding themselves across the state having problems with, is special ed, free and reduced lunch with maybe an ethnic code, ours specifically is Hispanic, and then also limited English proficiency, which means they don't speak English at home. The family is not speaking English at home, and the child is now in our school district. Students of those are finding themselves having issues with language barriers, as well as a learning disability, as well as maybe not having some support systems at home. And so those are the kids that we're struggling with to get them to the area in which they need to pass, or at least show that we're showing progress in. And that seems to be a district, not just a district, but a statewide issue. So that's where Marshall is finding itself having to focus its time and staff development monies on to see what we can do with these students so that they can get prepared for the tests. Now, when it comes to a learning disability, we need to go by their IEPs and what their accommodations are, and then looking at their classrooms and seeing how their schedules are working. So there's combinations of things that we can do and probably do better. Ultimately, it comes down to they need to pass the same test as a regular academic student. But they have some other things in their lives that are preventing them from passing that test. And that's where we need to meet them at their needs. And that's where we're struggling, to be honest. That's where we're struggling.
Well, now I've heard that you guys have implemented a couple of maybe new programs to kind of address that. I know you're doing something special for the freshmen, incoming freshmen at Marshall Public Schools. I know you've got a program called Fast Forward, some different things. Are those some of the steps you're taking to maybe help along some of those kids that are struggling a little bit?
They are, and what's important is that our approach has been working on being very balanced. And what do I mean when I say that? We know that while we continue to want to shore up and improve those students that may not be making adequate yearly progress or meeting the testing requirements, we also know that we have to continue to challenge those students that are exceeding those performance requirements as established by the standards in the state of Minnesota. And in order to do that, we've done some things that are really important and innovative, and some of those things include, like we said, the Freshman Academy, which is an academy that really speaks to students that are coming in that are at risk for not making it on that assessment, going back to how high stakes these are now, particularly for that class of 2010. We know that we want this implemented so that students are given an opportunity to be successful, and really what we're looking at are students that are at risk academically, and those have been put into, it's really called a school within a school model, where what we've done is we've said we're going to take those students and over the course of a full year, rather than doing it in the block with the large amount of time in a block schedule, over the full year we're providing intensive instruction and interventions with mathematics and with reading in particular, so that those students have all the opportunity to be successful. This is the first year we're doing it, so we're really excited about that. The Fast Forward program, and that's not fast for word, W-A-R-D, it's fast for word, W-O-R-D, and that's exactly what it is. It's a language program that really is about brain research and brain study, and it's best practice in the nation in terms of interventions to provide kids with skills to help brain connections and those neurons and those synapses that help us formulate and understand how language is formed and words are made. And for a lot of people that's really hard to understand. But a simple example is, for you and I, the word flip. We may hear the F, we may hear the IP, the IP sound, but that blend of that L and that F, it is really difficult for certain people to hear. We may hear that, but other students may, when we say the word flip, they may just hear the word FIP. And what this program does is it helps train the ear and the mind at the same time to hear those word sounds, so that linguistically they're prepared to be better readers. And we know that if you're an effective reader, you're going to do well in society, because if you can read, you can really teach yourself anything. So that's something at our lower levels that we're doing. And then, of course, in our middle school, what we've done is we've implemented some real intensive work with enrichment opportunities for our kids, and those are broke out with the students and teams of teachers to really take those students that are most at risk academically and providing those enrichment opportunities. So those are all things that we've done for remediation. On the other side, we're continuing to challenge our students. We've implemented this year College in the Schools programs. We continue to look at growing our advanced placement opportunities, because we know that's a sign of a very high-functioning, high-quality high school, and the number of advanced placement opportunity students are provided. So we've done those things in the middle school. we're breaking down barriers in terms of grade levels for students that may be academically gifted, particularly in the area of mathematics. We have a fifth grade student right now, for example, taking seventh and eighth grade math courses. So we're breaking down those barriers, really tailoring it more to the child's needs. And then at the primary level, we've done some things with, and this is going to, I think, be a good segue into some things that Tammy can share about what we've done. We're doing some things called differentiated instruction, not only at the elementary school, but all levels. And I'll let Tammy share a little bit about that, because this has been an initiative that she's provided some leadership on, and it's really an exciting piece as we're looking at what we do for students, but more so what we're doing to prepare our teachers to meet those needs of those students. So
This year for our district-wide staff development, we had ASCD, which is the National Curriculum Development Committee, come in and do some training with our teachers. And district-wide, so it was all levels. The trainers came in for each level, so I had a trainer at each level. Differentiated instruction is a classroom strategy for teachers. They would take a major unit, and whatever they needed the students to know and do, they would create not just one way to show the teacher they knew how or had achieved the accomplishment of knowing what the teacher was trying to get across to them. What they do is they create several different ways for students, and the students have choices to say, I get to choose how I'm going to prove to you that I understand what I was taught. It could be a project of some kind, it could be a paper of some kind, it could be just a presentation. But the teacher would do that. They don't do it for absolutely everything, they do it for the big major concepts. So students can show that they understood what was being taught and that they could demonstrate that they totally understood the concept and created a connection in the brain that they could produce a product that says, I understood what I was supposed to understand. Differentiated instruction is a classroom strategy. It isn't a curriculum per se. It is a way for teachers to be able to reach all levels of students. So the projects would vary in degrees of difficulty also. So the students would be able to pick, I want something that challenges me, or I want to show you the basic that I understood what I was supposed to understand. So it's a pretty neat way. Instead of teaching right to the middle, you're able to get to all students in your classroom and have all students feel successful. Some students are successful just verbally telling you that they understand versus writing what they were supposed to do. Or some are better at maybe creating something that makes the teacher understand that they got the major concepts. So differentiated instruction isn't something that happens overnight. It's something that the teachers have to take a little bit of time. We ask them to take one of their units and create a differentiated instruction strategy for that, and we'll continue to do that. It's not an initiative, it's a strategy. It's a tool to use in the classroom. And it can be used in any classroom and any subject matter throughout the system. And that's why we chose that particular strategy for teachers. Beyond that, in the elementary schools, this summer we trained on guided reading. Guided reading is a practice to get kids ready to read or process through the reading, classroom reading teaching. And basically the other thing that I had the teachers go to is a workshop, and they actually brought this to me. It's called the Sisters. And the Sisters have a system called the Daily Five. And the Daily Five works with the guided reading. It basically, the teacher does a major classroom instruction, whole group instruction for a few minutes. Then they release the students off to do independent work. Well, they have to train the kids to do this independent work, so it's a system where they ultimately release the student to become an independent learner, knowing full well what they're going to be doing when they're independently on their own. And then the teacher can do some small group instruction and assessment. So ultimately, it's called the Daily Five. Eventually, there are 5 things the kids are going to be able to do as they release them to be independent learners. It could be reading to themselves, reading to a partner, writing, combinations of things. The teachers are really excited about that, and they're implementing that in Parkside for Reading.
As I'm listening to this, the scope of this is so large. I mean,
Very.
because you're talking staff, you're talking students, you're talking reading, writing, and then comprehension, just to be able to retain something that I struggle with now, is retention. What goes in, you got to be able to have it come out, and of course that's where your test results come.
Absolutely, and you know, this is such a paradigm shift, Doug, for education, and particularly as we look at traditional education, because traditional education was, and this is probably the schooling system that all three of us went through, we're going to roll the bowling ball down the middle of the alley, and we're going to see how many pins we can knock down. And if we're really good at rolling that ball down the middle of the alley, we're even going to get those pins on the side. But most of the time, we know that we're going to leave some pins on the edge, and that was okay. Unfortunately, that was the old paradigm of education. And I know that I have classmates of mine, I'm sure that both of you do as well, that you can think of when I say that well, maybe that student wasn't challenged as much as what they should have been, and maybe that student didn't get the supports that they should have. And there are some people out there that believe that that rolling that ball down the middle is all that it takes, and it's the student's responsibility to pick themselves up as the pin and move to the middle of the alley and set down again so they can get knocked down by that bowling ball. And using that bowling analogy, that's absolutely ridiculous to think that would happen. We would certainly love for that to happen. At least I know I would in my bowling game, the way that I bowl. But the bottom line is if we're going to meet our mission, which is something that we take very seriously. It's on the back of every name badge that our staff members have. It's posted broadly in every building that we have. It was part of our strategic plan, and we take it very seriously when we say that our mission is to develop the potential of each learner for success in an ever-changing world. When you really break that down to what that means, each means each, all means all. And years ago, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years ago, educational access was the standard. You were given access to an educational opportunity. That was good enough. Now what you do with that access is up to you. But because of the research that we've studied in our system and the research that we've applied in what we do as we're preparing our students, as we're training our teachers, as we're working within our system, we know that it's no longer adequate to provide access. It's about producing results. And with results comes changes in policy, changes in procedure, and ultimately changes in the practices in the classroom. And that's really what Tammy's talking about, is research-based, data-driven decisions about how to make improvements that produce sustainable results. Not results where, okay, I'm given the spelling test on Monday, I'm going to study those words, I'm going to commit them to memory, and then Friday I take the test, and you ask me again Monday on how to spell that word, I completely forget. That's not sustainable. We're talking about, as you referenced earlier, large-scale, sustainable, systemic changes, because we know that ultimately our kids deserve it, our community deserves it. They've invested a tremendous amount of trust and a tremendous amount of resources in us. And if we don't take that very seriously, we know that we jeopardize that trust and that commitment that our community has made. And we take that charge very seriously, and I think we've given at least a glimpse of some of those things today of what we're doing relative to that, and how Tammy's role is so important in helping us do that and committing to that process on an ongoing basis as we look at changing things, because education is something that it's kind of like turning the Titanic. You don't turn it on a dime. But we know that with the high standards that we have and the accountability measures that we have in place and our own internal accountability, going back to that Baldrige continuous improvement model that we've applied, we know how important it is that we're analyzing our results, studying our results, looking at our own practices and saying, how can we get better?
That's so well said, and I appreciate your how you stated that, because and plus your analogy of the bowling, we're knocking down a lot of pins.
Yep.
But every once in a while we get a 7-10 split.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yep.
And Tammy's leading us and showing us how to get those pick up those 7-10 splits.
Absolutely.
So I guess as once again, I know Jess is saying it's time to wrap up our show, but I want to thank Tammy for being with us today and sharing all her knowledge and providing us with a little more insight into how the curriculum is planned, how it's implemented, and the results as we continue to evaluate our Marshall Public Schools students, our system, and how it is effectively working in our community. Any last thoughts as we say goodbye to another edition of Tiger Talk?
Just go Tigers. Like I said, homecoming week wrapping up, and before we know it, we're going to be looking headlong into the playoffs, and we know that communities, our community in particular, has high expectations for our students. Get out there and support those Tigers with those expectations, because we know that's what really makes the difference for our kids. They love to see the stands packed, and as I walk through the halls and talk to students, they'll comment about we had a full house at the volleyball game the other night, or boy, it was great to see people packed out at the football game, and when our kids notice that, that it's important. So again, just continue to wear that black and orange and get out and support our Tigers, our marching band, and every other program, our soccer programs, all those things, because again, it's an opportunity for the community to engage in what our kids are doing, and for our kids to really showcase their best for them. So that's how I'd like to leave it for today. And thanks to Tammy for being here with me.
You're welcome.
Sounds
Thanks
great.
for having me.
And if you do have any questions, I guess, and that we always like to end our show a little bit. If you do have any questions about anything we've talked about tonight or anything in the Marshall Public Schools, how would our general public make contact?
We maintain a very open policy in terms of reaching out. We want our community to be engaged with us, and likewise, we want to get out and engage our community. And that's part of the reason we do this show. And they can send us an email. My email's on the district webpage. Tammy's is as well. And that's probably the easiest reference to give people. And that's www.swmn.org. That's the easiest way to interface with the school system. Go in there, you'll find contact numbers, you'll find email addresses, and we do have open door policies where if people want to sit down and visit with us, set up an appointment, make some time to come in. We're like any other business where you want to set up a time to meet with senior leaders and executive level people. We'll do that. But just set up the appointment, and we'll welcome people in, because again, we want people to be engaged and know and just be involved in their schools, because this is their public schools.
Sounds great. Thank you. Once again, that website is www.swmn.org, and I think there is a www.marshall.k12.
Yep, k12.mn.us.
And you can also
that's another place. Absolutely.
Grab some of the information. So we hope you've enjoyed the show tonight and our second edition of Tiger Talk. We'll once again be showing this throughout the next couple of weeks, and we'll be back in a couple of weeks with a couple of new guests. On behalf of Clint Willert, Tammy Schultz, my name's Doug Goodman, and we hope you enjoyed the show. Thank you, and good evening.